Today, Senator Dick Durbin confronts that question head-on, challenging America's moral compass over the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. This isn't just politics. It's about conscience, compassion, and the cost of silence.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Let me personally thank you for your leadership on this subcommittee. We may disagree on some things and some projects, but I believe you've been honest in working with us in the past, and I look forward to that continuing. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you. 99-0. That's a pretty good score coming out of the Senate. I'd like to ask you about Gaza, if I can. They anticipate a famine is underway in Gaza. In the next few days, they anticipate 14,000 infants and children will die. Israel has decided to change its policy to release baby food into Gaza. I just have to ask you, as you must see the same pictures I do, you can't escape them, of these kids with pencil-thin arms, with ribs you can count, spindly legs, wide eyes, who are just on the cusp of death because of the policy of Israel in dealing with Hamas. Now, let me make it clear for the record. I support Israel. I believe what happened October 7th was an act of terrorism, unforgivable act of terrorism, and they have a right to defend themselves, period. Number two, I believe Hamas is a terrorist organization. I do not believe that every Palestinian in Gaza territory is a member of Hamas or sympathetic with that band of terrorists, but many of them are. So today, three countries, France, United Kingdom, and Canada, made a statement which I'd like to summarize. You probably know this already. They said the resumption of aid into Gaza by Israel wholly inadequate. The United Kingdom paused free trade talks with Israel and sanctioned Israeli settlers. And then this statement, joint message by these three countries, allies of the United States. If Israel does not cease the renewed military offensive and lift its restrictions on humanitarian aid, we will take further concrete action in response. Mr. Secretary, are we on the wrong side of history and watching this unfold and not responding as these three countries have?
Well, we're not prepared to respond the way these three countries have, but we are prepared to say, as we have, and I think the Israelis in their statements today acknowledged, have engaged with our Israeli partners over the weekend and the last few days about the need to resume humanitarian aid. We anticipate that those flows will increase over the next few days and weeks. It's important that that be achieved. I actually had an opportunity when I was in Rome on Sunday or Saturday to see Cindy McCain, as you know, is involved with a World Food Program, discuss their distribution systems. She outlined for me exactly how they would distribute food and how the program would work if it were to be restarted. So suffice it to say that we support 100% the fact that there can be no future in Gaza for the people of Gaza as long as Hamas is around. And by the way, in your comments that you made, I know many of you have noticed, there's been a growing number of anti-Hamas protests and demonstrations as well. So there are people there that understand that this is the root cause of it. That said, you have this acute, immediate challenge of food and aid not reaching people, and you have existing distribution systems that could get them there. So we have, and continue to work, even though I've been here in hearings all week, all day, but continued to work with our Israeli partners and as I think they've acknowledged in the statement today that they've heard from us, to allow more aid in, because I believe they can achieve their objective of defeating Hamas while still allowing aid to enter in sufficient quantities.
I agree with you. I think what you just said should be our policy. But I don't think we should use these people, these Palestinians, particularly these children, as just a casualty of war. This is a designed attack by Israel into Gaza. This is a designed decision by Israel not to provide humanitarian aid, food, medicine, water. And we provide quite a bit of money to Israel for its own defense and for other purposes. Shouldn't we be more forthcoming to speak about this humanitarian crisis?
Yeah, I think there's two things that Israel has expressed, and I don't want to speak for them because they speak for often on this topic. The first is their complaints that humanitarian aid is often stolen and siphoned off by Hamas elements. Well, it has. There's no doubt that there has happened. That said, the question is whether it has to be. The question is there a way to reliably reach as many people as possible and prevent the humanitarian crisis you're describing, while not enriching Hamas or providing Hamas relief? And we believe there is a way to do it. And we want to be supportive of that way to do it. And we've encouraged them to do it in that way, and we think we've made progress.
Did you ask Cindy McCain whether Hamas was diverting food supplies from the people in Gaza?
We didn't discuss that. We talked mostly about, I wanted to get a description of what the distribution points look like. How can you get assistance to the most number of people as quickly as possible in an orderly way based on where they live and where they are in different parts of Gaza?
Is this an emergency humanitarian situation in your view?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think we all see the same images. The question that I had in my mind in meeting with her and discussing is, do we have the mechanisms in place to quickly start, if in fact an agreement could be reached to allow humanitarian aid to flow? Did we have the mechanics in place to allow the World Food Program and their contractors to go in and immediately begin to provide it? And she assured me that they do, that they could, because one of the arguments or one of the concerns that existed is that the organizations that could do the distribution were not on the ground or were not capable of starting so quickly. She assured us that they were.
If we have this in place, what are we waiting for? These children are dying.
Well, it's my understanding, again, I've been here all day, but it's my understanding that starting yesterday and moving through the next few days, aid will increasingly flow in, and hopefully that will allow these programs to work.
I certainly hope so, too. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
In this fiery Senate exchange, Senator Dick Durbin confronts Secretary Marco Rubio with a question that pierces through the noise of politics and diplomacy. Are we on the wrong side of history? It's not just a rhetorical jab, it's a moral challenge, a demand for self-reflection aimed squarely at America's conscience. At the heart of this hearing lies a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza, a crisis that is not abstract or distant, but deeply human. Reports from aid organizations and global observers describe a population on the brink of starvation. Hospitals are collapsing, clean water is scarce, and, as Durbin painfully highlights, over 14,000 children are at risk of dying from hunger and disease. These are not statistics, these are human lives. Infants, toddlers, mothers, fathers, caught in the crossfire of political violence and policy indecision. Durbin's tone throughout this exchange is deliberate and weary, almost pleading. He begins by reaffirming something crucial: support for Israel's right to defend itself after the horrific Hamas attacks on October 7th. But from there, he pivots toward a broader question of morality and accountability. At what point does the defense of a nation become the destruction of a people? How long can the world rationalize mass suffering as collateral damage? His question is not anti-Israel, it's profoundly pro-humanity. What Durbin is asking, what he's forcing us to consider, is whether the United States, with its vast influence and deep ties to Israel, is using that power to mitigate suffering or to excuse it. He cites France, the United Kingdom, and Canada, three of America's closest allies, who have publicly condemned Israel's restriction of humanitarian aid and even taken steps to apply diplomatic pressure. These nations, he points out, are not abandoning Israel. They are standing up for the universal values that form the bedrock of all democracies: dignity, justice, and compassion. Durbin's question, "Are we on the wrong side of history?" echoes with the weight of moral history. It recalls moments when nations looked the other way in the face of suffering: Rwanda in 1994, Bosnia in the 1990s, Darfur in the 2000s. History judges those moments harshly, not because of what the perpetrators did, but because of what the rest of the world failed to do. Secretary Rubio's response, though measured, reveals the bureaucratic mindset that often defines U.S. foreign policy. He acknowledges the crisis, admits the need for more aid, and assures Durbin that the administration is working with Israel to ensure humanitarian supplies reach civilians. But his words lack urgency. They lack the moral fire that Durbin's plea demands. Rubio speaks of coordination, systems, and procedures, while Durbin speaks of dying children, visible ribs, and the moral stain of inaction. This is where the tension lies, between policy and principle, between the cold machinery of geopolitics and the warmth of human empathy. America has always prided itself on being a moral leader, a beacon of democracy and freedom. But in moments like this, that self-image is tested. Can a nation that claims to champion human rights stay silent while its ally restricts food and medicine to civilians? Can we claim to defend democracy if we ignore the suffering of innocents under the banner of national security? Durbin's challenge goes beyond Israel and Gaza. It's about the soul of American foreign policy. For decades, the U.S. has walked a diplomatic tightrope, defending Israel's right to exist while attempting to support Palestinian human rights. But what's unfolding now in Gaza suggests that balance has tipped too far in one direction. When American aid and weapons flow freely to one side, while humanitarian aid is restricted to the other, neutrality becomes complicity. Durbin's argument also exposes a deeper hypocrisy in how we, as a global community, define terrorism. Hamas's atrocities are rightly condemned as terrorism, but what do we call the deliberate starvation of civilians? What do we call the bombing of refugee camps or the blocking of life-saving aid? If terrorism is defined as the intentional infliction of fear and suffering on civilians, then can a state not also be guilty of it when it denies food and medicine to the most vulnerable? This is the uncomfortable truth Durbin forces into the room, and it's a truth that America, with all its moral rhetoric, cannot afford to ignore. The senator's frustration becomes even more powerful when he points out the disparity between U.S. words and actions. Billions of dollars flow to Israel annually for defense, but when the issue turns to humanitarian relief, Washington hesitates. The same administration that can authorize airstrikes within hours struggles to coordinate food deliveries within weeks. That dissonance isn't just political, it's moral. America has always prided itself on being a moral leader, a beacon of democracy and freedom. But in moments like this, that self-image is tested. Can a nation that claims to champion human rights stay silent while its ally restricts food and medicine to civilians? Can we claim to defend democracy if we ignore the suffering of innocents under the banner of national security? Durbin's challenge goes beyond Israel and Gaza. It's about the soul of American foreign policy. For decades, the U.S. has walked a diplomatic tightrope, defending Israel's right to exist while attempting to support Palestinian human rights. But what's unfolding now in Gaza suggests that balance has tipped too far in one direction. When American aid and weapons flow freely to one side, while humanitarian aid is restricted to the other, neutrality becomes complicity. Durbin's argument also exposes a deeper hypocrisy in how we, as a global community, define terrorism. Hamas's atrocities are rightly condemned as terrorism, but what do we call the deliberate starvation of civilians? What do we call the bombing of refugee camps or the blocking of life-saving aid? If terrorism is defined as the intentional infliction of fear and suffering on civilians, then can a state not also be guilty of it when it denies food and medicine to the most vulnerable? This is the uncomfortable truth Durbin forces into the room, and it's a truth that America, with all its moral rhetoric, cannot afford to ignore. The senator's frustration becomes even more powerful when he points out the disparity between U.S. words and actions. Billions of dollars flow to Israel annually, but when the issue turns to humanitarian relief, Washington hesitates. The same administration that can authorize airstrikes within hours struggles to coordinate food deliveries within weeks. That dissonance isn't just political, it's moral.